Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're embarking on, well, an absolutely fascinating journey. This is thanks to a listener who shared a really intriguing stack of sources, all kind of centered around a truly modern classic.
hmm
Now, while that title might immediately bring to mind The Black Swan and its iconic concepts of mediocristan and extremistan, what's really captivating about this entire collection of materials is how it collectively pushes us, to confront the very nature of randomness
Yes, exactly.
and the profound limits of our ability to forecast, and how we as individuals and as a society grapple with what often feels like a wildly unpredictable world. We're essentially preparing to welcome you to Extremistan today, where the unexpected doesn't just happen, it rules.
Indeed. And what's crucial to understand right from the outset is that many of these influential texts, spanning business, finance, human psychology, even economic history, they're implicitly, or sometimes quite explicitly, exploring these fundamental distinctions that Nassim Nicholas Taleb so brilliantly articulates. We're talking about those domains of reality where, predictable averages and gentle fluctuations largely dominate. Think gentle slopes. Versus those much wilder territories where extreme, unforeseen events hold disproportionate and, frankly, often transformative sway. Sheer cliffs, almost.
Oh, wait.
So our core mission today is really to distill those vital nuggets of knowledge that illuminate precisely how we think about, how we operate within, and ultimately how we're shaped by these varying degrees of uncertainty, especially in those moments when our familiar tools, our usual ways of understanding the world, they just fail us.
That's a powerful distinction, and it's one that I think often contradicts our deepest instincts, doesn't it?
It really does.
So for our listeners who might be encountering these terms for the first time or maybe just need a quick refresh, could you quickly sketch out the fundamental difference between these two worlds that Taleb describes so brilliantly? How do we know if we're in mediocristan or extremistan, and why does that distinction matter so profoundly for our decisions, whether they're personal or professional?
That's a crucial question, absolutely. Because mistaking one for the other can have, well, devastating consequences. Think of mediocrism as the domain of the familiar, the comfortable bell curve.
Okay, the bell curve.
Right, where most things cluster comfortably around an average. Imagine human height, for example. If you gather, say, 1,000 people and measure them, most will be fairly close to the average height.
Sure.
And the tallest person in the room might be, 7 feet tall, maybe a bit more, but not drastically more. If that person leaves the room, the average height of the group barely budges.
Right, makes sense.
Individual data points don't drastically alter the overall picture. And extreme events, statistically speaking, are pretty insignificant. So prediction based on averages and past data, it actually works pretty well here. It's reliable.
Okay, so that's mediocristan, comfortable, predictable. What about extremistan?
Extremistan. That is an entirely different beast. This is the domain of the black swan, that rare, unpredictable event with massive, often retrospective impact.
Game changer.
Exactly. Here, a single extreme event can dominate everything. Think about wealth, for instance. If you gather 1,000 people in a room, just average folks, and then suddenly Jeff Bezos walks in,
Okay.
the average wealth of that room skyrockets overnight. One individual, one extreme data point can utterly skew the average. It makes the average almost meaningless, doesn't it?
Completely meaningless, yeah.
So in extremistan, averages are not just misleading, they can be actively dangerous if you rely on them.
Ah.
Extreme events, though rare, have these disproportionate transformative impacts. They are the winners and losers of the game, really. They dictate the narrative.
Oh.
And our fundamental challenge, and what this deep dive will continually highlight, I think, is our persistent tendency to apply mediocristan thinking, with its reliance on averages, predictability, the bell curve, to an extremistan world where it simply, fundamentally, doesn't apply.
That makes perfect sense. It's like, as you said, bringing a ruler to measure a hurricane, just the wrong tool for the job.
It's precise.
All right, let's really dig into this then. We're going to explore why our gut feelings about how the world works are often dead wrong when we're confronted with extremistan, and what that profound mismatch means for, well, everything, from your investment portfolio to how you lead a team in a world that's far less stable and predictable than we often pretend it is.
Mm.
It feels so utterly natural, doesn't it, to look at what's happened before and instinctively assume, well, it'll happen again. It's just how we learn, how we navigate daily life.
Mhm.
We spot a pattern, we trust it, and we unconsciously start building our entire worldview around the expectation that things will continue to behave in a, stable, predictable fashion. And this works perfectly well in many aspects of life, right? Those parts of the world that truly reside in mediocrism.
And that's our system one at work,
Yeah.
that intuitive, fast-thinking part of our brain. It excels at pattern recognition, quick judgments. It's incredibly efficient. But it's also prone to significant biases when faced with the complexities of extremistan. As the intelligent investor points out, humans have an inborn tendency to believe that the long run can be predicted from even a short series of outcomes.
Okay, yeah.
We see a fund beat the market for a few years, and our intuition, driven by System 1, immediately tells us, expect it to keep right on outperforming. We automatically, and often mistakenly, apply that mediocristan mindset.
Where things are sort of well-behaved.
Exactly. Well-behaved, past performance predicts future results, even to domains that are anything but well-behaved. We project the comfort of that bell curve onto scenarios where the next event could be a complete outlier, something unprecedented.
So we're not just passively observing patterns, we're actively projecting them, almost willing them into existence sometimes.
Yes, it's a good way to put it.
And it's not just our basic human intuition, is it? There are even highly sophisticated investment strategies built entirely on this very idea. Strategies like smart beta funds, which, on the surface sound incredibly intelligent.
Precisely. And they are sophisticated in their construction. Consider these smart beta investment strategies mentioned in A Random Walk Down Wall Street. These aren't just passive index funds that simply track the market.
Oh.
They actively tilt portfolios towards specific, historically validated factors. We're talking about characteristics like value-buying stocks that seem cheap relative to their earnings, or book value, or momentum, chasing stocks that have been doing well recently,
Okay.
or even low volatility, focusing on less turbulent companies. The underlying assumption, the core bet, is that these factors have historically generated larger returns and therefore should consistently deliver above-average performance. It's a very, very mediocristan-centric approach.
Identify consistent attributes from the past.
Right. And bet they'll continue to provide a predictable edge in the future.
But the reality, as the source indicates, doesn't always align with this neat, predictable model, does it?
No, it often doesn't. The same source critically adds that the records of single-factor smart beta funds and ETFs have been spotty. Many single-factor ETFs have failed to produce reliable excess returns.
Spotty. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement.
Not at all. And this creates a clear and, frankly, deeply unsettling disconnect. Our intuitive belief in predictable patterns, which works perfectly fine for, say, managing inventory in a stable supply chain, a classic mediocristan task.
Yeah.
It just crumbles when applied to the chaotic, high-impact dynamics of financial markets, which often behave like extremistan. In extremistan, past performance is often a poor predictor of future results because the next truly impactful event could be an entirely new phenomenon, a black swan.
Rendering all historical averages irrelevant.
Exactly. It's like bringing that ruler to measure the hurricane again, expecting it to behave like a gentle breeze. It's just the wrong framework.
So what's the core insight here? If our minds are constantly trying to impose order and predictability, even where it doesn't really exist, what does that mean for our decision-making? I remember reading Daniel Kahneman's work, Thinking Fast and Slow, which describes us as constantly making bold forecasts and timid decisions. That always struck me.
That's a powerful and, somewhat unsettling observation. Bold forecasts and timid decisions. It really highlights a profound internal conflict, doesn't it?
It does.
Why do we as individuals and organizations so often speak with such conviction about the future, laying out these grand plans, yet act with such caution, such timidity when it comes to truly committing to those very predictions?
Yeah, what's going on there?
Well, the deeper insight here, I think, is that optimism, while absolutely vital for our psychological survival, for resilience, even for our ability to persevere through difficulty.
Sure, you need optimism.
You absolutely do. But it actively sabotages our capacity to learn from the very extremistan events that blindside us. As Thinking Fast and Slow highlights, this optimistic explanation style helps us take credit for successes but little blame for failures.
Right, the self-serving bias.
Exactly. By consistently crediting ourselves for wins and blaming external forces, bad luck, whatever, for losses, we create this impenetrable echo chamber. We lock ourselves into a perpetual cycle of overconfidence and, crucially, under-preparation for the truly impactful, unexpected blow.
So we never really learn from the big mistakes.
We often don't internalize them properly. This inherent human bias can lead us to grossly overestimate our ability to predict, especially in highly uncertain environments. Think about successful scientists. The text suggests they often need almost a delusional sense of significance to persevere through constant setbacks and failures.
Huh. A necessary delusion, almost.
Perhaps. But this isn't just a minor cognitive quirk. It's a fundamental cognitive trap when you're operating in extremistan. Because in extremistan, one large negative event, one black swan, can wipe out years, even decades of small successes. And our inability to accurately assign blame or responsibility because of this optimism bias prevents us from adapting effectively. We become incredibly vulnerable to black swans because we refuse to acknowledge their possibility or our role in failing to prepare for their potential impact.
But what if the problem runs even deeper? What if the very foundations of our predictions are fundamentally shaky? If the future isn't just hard to guess accurately, but in some crucial domains, it's fundamentally unknowable. It's one thing to be slightly off in a weather forecast, or that still operates within a known range of possibilities, more or less mediocre stan. But it's quite another to be predicting something that has no real prior data, no average to revert to, no familiar distribution, like the impact of a completely new technology.
This raises an important, almost existential question for anyone who plans or invests. When are our models simply inadequate? When are we using those mediocristan tools like standard deviation and bell curves in an extremistan world where they just don't fit?
Right. When is the map useless?
Exactly. And John Maynard Keynes, towering figure in economics in his work, The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money, made a candid and truly humbling admission about this. He wrote that our basis of knowledge for estimating the yield 10 years hence of a railway, a copper mine, a textile factory, amounts to little and sometimes to nothing.
Wow. Little and sometimes to nothing. That's blunt.
It's incredibly blunt, especially coming from Keynes. He went further, calling investment partly a lottery, where outcomes are only largely governed by whether the abilities and character of the managers were above or below the average.
A lottery.
Think about that. He's acknowledging pervasive, radical uncertainty, even in seemingly structured long-term capital projects. Keynes is essentially saying that for these ventures, the average isn't just insufficient, it's irrelevant.
Okay.
The biggest gains or losses come from these rare, manager-dependent, highly variable outcomes. It's a clear signal that this domain of investment operates under extremistan rules, not mediocristan ones. A lottery implies a fat-tail distribution, right, where the extremes matter most, not the central tendency.
A lottery. That's quite a concession from a legendary economist. Essentially admitting that even with all their intricate models, a significant part of investment boils down to chance and the unpredictable variance of human ability. But if it's partly a lottery, how do we even begin to distinguish between true, repeatable skill and pure, fleeting luck in these long-term ventures? Are we ever truly capable of building models that grasp the full picture in these domains?
That's precisely the challenge, isn't it? And it's not just about minor inaccuracies. We're talking about situations where our entire premise for prediction might be flawed because we're using a tool designed for one kind of world mediocristan with its nice predictable averages to understand a totally different one, extremistan, where those averages are not just misleading but actively dangerous. Good strategy, bad strategy offers a really compelling philosophical parallel here, drawing on Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorem.
Oh, Gödel. Okay, this is getting deep.
It is, but it's a powerful metaphor. The book states that sufficiently complex logical systems are incomplete, which means they contain statements and propositions that cannot be judged true or false within the logic of the system. To truly judge their truth, one must look beyond the system to outside knowledge.
Look outside the system.
Exactly. And this isn't just abstract philosophy, it's a profound metaphor for how even the most sophisticated internal models operating within a neatly defined set of assumptions can utterly fail to capture external realities. Particularly in markets where, as Keynes himself observed, mass psychology can drive valuations rather than pure quantifiable fundamentals.
So our models are inherently incomplete.
In many complex domains, yes. Our attempts to create complete, predictable models in finance or business are often like trying to prove Gödel's theorem within its own system. It's an impossible task, because the truly significant factors, the black swans, the game changers, often lie outside the very system we've built to understand them.
They're the unknown unknowns.
Precisely. The unknown unknowns that our established logic simply cannot contain or predict.
So we've spent some time exploring how our minds tend to trick us into expecting a predictable, mediocristan world, and how even our most sophisticated models often fall short because they're designed for that world. But let's get concrete. What does this truly wild side of reality, this extremistan, actually look like when it plays out in the real world? What are those unmistakable markers that tell us we're no longer in the comfortable realm of averages, but standing on genuinely shifting ground?
Hmm.
When we talk about unpredictable, wild outcomes, what are some real-world examples that really drive this home? Because we're not talking about small deviations from the mean here. We're talking about events that can fundamentally reshape an industry, an economy, or even a global financial system.
Right.
Events that completely upend our mediocristan expectations and force us to confront the true power of extremistan. What does that look like in practice?
Oh, it's not abstract at all. We see this acutely and frankly repeatedly in financial and economic history. Business Adventures. That collection of John Brooks' essays vividly recounts the wilder days of Wall Street. Take the infamous Piggly Wiggly stock frenzy.
Ah, yes, the Piggly Wiggly story.
Classic. Here, a shrewd entrepreneur named Clarence Saunders effectively cornered the market on his own company's stock. He forced short sellers into this frantic scramble. The account describes how Piggly Wiggly, as Saunders well knew, simply wasn't to be had, except, of course, from him.
He had them cornered.
Completely. The price was bid up wildly, disconnected from any sense of fundamental value, only for a sudden rumor, another unpredictable element to cause a sharp fall. This wasn't a normal, gentle fluctuation based on earnings reports. It was a sudden, outsized event driven by speculation, market mechanics, and a profound lack of liquidity. It led to extreme price movements completely divorced from intrinsic value. It's a textbook example of a market operating firmly in extremistan, where a single specific action combined with herd behavior created this explosive, non-average outcome.
And it wasn't just individual stock stunts like Piggly Wiggly, right? These sources talk about systemic shifts, too, where entire financial landscapes were suddenly reshaped by the unexpected, things that affected everyone.
Absolutely. The same source, Business Adventures, describes how, after 1958, monetary crises began springing up virtually overnight.
Overnight.
Virtually overnight. This led to the urgent creation of the International Swap Network. This was designed to give central banks instant access to funds to defend their currencies against sudden and violent speculative attacks.
Wow, so these weren't gradual, predictable ebbs and flows in currency markets.
Not at all. They were abrupt, high-stakes situations that could destabilize entire economies. They demanded rapid, unprecedented responses. These events were completely outside the realm of what a standard, mediocristan economic model with its slow-moving averages and incremental changes would predict.
Right.
They forced institutions to adapt, reactively, to an extremistan reality characterized by sudden, high-impact disruptions. The system itself had to evolve to cope with these unpredictable shocks.
The description of these crises springing up virtually overnight is genuinely chilling. It utterly shatters that comfortable illusion of gradual change and linear progression we often hold on to.
It does.
It makes me wonder, were these truly unpredictable in every sense, or were they simply unforeseen because people were looking through that mediocristan lens?
It sounds like these events don't just happen gradually. They can materialize with shocking speed, like a sudden massive jump in wealth, as in your Bezos example, or a devastating market crash, rather than a slow, steady increase in average height.
That's a really perceptive question, and I think often the answer is both. They're often unpredictable within the prevailing models because those models are frequently built for mediocristan. They assume stability.
Okay.
But from an extremistan perspective, they are precisely the kind of events you should anticipate, even if you can't predict their exact timing or form. You know, even Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations, written centuries ago, noted in its historical context that economic progress is, quote, necessarily slow, uncertain, liable to be disturbed and interrupted by innumerable accidents. Innumerable accidents, even back then.
Even back then. This older observation gains new resonance when we consider modern market volatility and technological disruption. Deep thinkers recognize that the grand sweep of economic development wasn't some smooth, predictable curve, but a journey punctuated by unforeseen shocks. It hints at the inherent extremistan nature of societal evolution. The accidents are the black swans of history.
This idea of a wild world also profoundly touches on how success and failure might be distributed. Is it always about merit hard work paying off proportionally? Or is there a strong, perhaps unsettling element of chance that can radically alter outcomes, especially in these high-impact domains of extremistan?
This raises an important and, yes, often provocative question about fundamental fairness and the true drivers of outcomes. Milton Friedman, in Capitalism and Freedom, makes a really provocative statement. He says that most differences of status or position or wealth can be regarded as the product of chance at a far enough remove.
Wow, product of chance.
He suggests that even qualities we laud, like being hardworking and thrifty, owe much to the genes he was fortunate or unfortunate enough to inherit. This is a powerful counterpoint to purely meritocratic narratives.
Definitely.
It suggests that in areas like wealth or fame or status, classic extremistan domains, the distribution isn't a neat, bell-shaped curve where everyone gets what they deserve based purely on effort. Instead, it aligns more with a power law distribution.
Where a few get a huge share.
Exactly, a characteristic of extremistan, where a few factors, often random or inherited or just being in the right place at the right time, lead to disproportionately large outcomes. It implies that in extremistan, the playing field isn't flat, and the dice are often loaded from the start.
And the consequences of these shifts, these accidents, can be really tough for individuals, can't they? Even if they've done everything right to traditional mediocristan standards, like diligently acquiring a valuable skill over many years.
Absolutely. That's one of the harsh realities. Hayek, in The Road to Serfdom, highlights the tragic plight of the highly trained man whose hard-learned skill has suddenly lost its value because of some invention which greatly benefits the rest of society.
Oh, that's brutal.
It is. It's a direct, heartbreaking example of how broader, unpredictable shifts in technology and economy, which are hallmark events of extremistan, can have devastating, unforeseen impacts on individuals. Regardless of their effort or prior competence, their valuable skill, once a source of predictable income and security in a stable environment, suddenly becomes obsolete.
Not through any fault of their own.
No.
Yeah.
But due to a large external shock, a technological black swan. It makes you realize that in extremistan, job security isn't just about what you know, but often about how quickly you can learn something new and adapt.
That's a profoundly tragic reality, isn't it? We invest so much time and effort in developing a skill only for some innovation, maybe halfway across the world, to make it obsolete almost overnight. It's almost a cruel irony that society as a whole might benefit, but specific individuals suffer immensely. What strategies can possibly insulate someone from such a fundamental, unpredictable shift?
It's incredibly difficult at the individual level sometimes.
And it's not just about external events, is it? There's a deeper philosophical layer here in these sources about our inability to truly control the outcomes of our own actions, even our best intentions.
Indeed. Max Weber, in The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, offers this really profound take. Between action and consequence lies a chasm that no one can bridge, let alone control. He argues people can only truly know their intentions, and even that self-knowledge is highly imperfect. This isn't just a minor philosophical point. It underscores a deep, inherent reason for the unpredictability of outcomes. Our actions ripple outwards in complex systems, having repercussions far beyond our grasp or foresight.
Especially in interconnected systems.
Exactly, where small inputs can lead to massive, unforeseen effects. This chasm is precisely what defines extremistan, where the link between cause and effect is obscured, nonlinear, subject to feedback loops we don't understand. It tells us that even our best-laid plans based on our purest intentions can produce utterly unexpected, sometimes even contrary, results.
So, if we live in a world where chance and unforeseen events can dramatically shape outcomes, where the comfortable rules of mediocristan often don't apply, and where our very intentions can lead to unintended consequences, what does this mean for how we build businesses and lead our lives? How do we even operate when the ground beneath our feet feels like it's constantly shifting, when stability might just be an illusion? So if we can't reliably predict the future in extremistan, if our best-laid plans are always vulnerable to these unforeseen shocks, then how on earth do we build something that truly lasts? Is the answer trying to be incredibly rigid, controlling every possible variable? Or does resilience actually come from being incredibly flexible, constantly adapting? What kind of strategy actually works when you're operating in a world defined by its unpredictability?
It's unequivocally about dynamic flexibility. It's about embracing an evolutionary mindset almost. Built to Last, the book by Collins and Porras, provides incredibly clear guidance on this. A core message is, accept that mistakes will be made.
Okay, accept mistakes. Easier said than done sometimes.
True. But this isn't just giving permission for failure. It's a foundational operating principle for navigating extremistan. The book champions a philosophy of multiply vary, let the strongest live, and the weakest die.
Sounds a bit Darwinian.
It is, in a business sense. It's not a call for ruthless chaos, but for a continuous process of experimentation. Generate many options, try different approaches, and crucially, learn rapidly from the inevitable failures.
Right.
The classic example of 3M illustrates this perfectly. A failed car wax business wasn't seen as a dead end, but as a data point, a step on a serendipitous path that eventually led to the invention of Scotch tape.
Wow, from car wax to Scotch tape.
Exactly. The insight is profound. You cannot have a vibrant self-mutating system without lots of failed experiments. This is the complete antithesis of a rigid top-down plan designed for a predictable mediocristan world. Instead, you design for continuous learning for adaptation. You understand that most of your initial attempts probably won't be the big black swan success, but they might just pave the way for it. You're probing the environment.
That's a powerful reframing of failure, isn't it? From something to be avoided at all costs to an essential ingredient for innovation and long-term survival. This means staying incredibly alert for new opportunities, even if they emerge slowly or unexpectedly. Almost like waiting for the unexpected black swan opportunity to reveal itself rather than trying to force a predictable outcome. You can't predict the black swan, maybe, but you can prepare yourself to capitalize on it when it swims by.
Exactly. That preparedness for emergent opportunity is absolutely key. Seven Powers, another great source, describes how Netflix's crucial insight, the move into original content, didn't snap into focus until 2011, fully 4 years after they started streaming.
4 years, that's patience.
It is. And it wasn't some preordained step in a master plan from day one. It was a responsive yet undeniably radical move, starting with House of Cards in 2012. They made that huge commitment when the opportunity became clearly visible, when the market signals were undeniable.
They didn't predict the specific hit show.
No, but they had built the capacity, the flexibility, and the balance sheet to commit significantly when the time was right. Similarly, think about Intel's long-shot sales prospect with IBM back in the day. That eventually became a pivotal partnership, launching the PC revolution. It came about because, as the source says, times had changed for IBM, making them suddenly open to new methods of doing business.
Right place, right time.
It looks like that, but these are not moments of perfect foresight. These are moments where chance truly favors the prepared minds, not necessarily minds that predicted the exact outcome, but those that were flexible enough, alert enough to recognize and seize a novel, high-impact opportunity when it appeared. That's a characteristic feature of successfully navigating extremistan. Being ready, being anti-fragile, as Taleb would say.
What's truly fascinating here, and kind of paradoxical, is that sometimes the very things that make a company successful in a predictable, mediocristan market, efficiency, serving existing customers really well, optimizing current processes, those very strengths can become profound blind spots in an unpredictable extremistan world. They're so good at the old game, they completely miss the new ones starting next door.
That's the absolute core, the painful truth of The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. It highlights how leading computer manufacturers, giants like Apple and IBM at the time, despite their massive resources and technological prowess, lagged 5 years behind the leaders in bringing portable computers to market.
5 years is an eternity in tech. Why?
Because they were so laser-focused on their existing profitable customers and their needs. Those customers wanted faster chips, bigger hard drives for their desktops. They dismissed the smaller, less profitable, and initially lower-performance portable machines as niche toys. So often, it's new entrants or spin-offs, like Connor Peripherals in the book, that develop the disruptive products, like the smaller 3.5-inch drive, specifically for new applications, like portable machines. They prioritize different characteristics, lighter weight, ruggedness that the established players initially dismiss because their main customers don't value them yet.
So the incumbents are trapped.
They're often trapped by their own success, trapped in the predictable. They can't see, or more accurately, they can't justify internally allocating resources to these emergent wild opportunities because their internal systems, their metrics, their incentives are all optimized for mediocristan performance serving the current profitable market.
Their focus on incremental improvement, making current things slightly better,
Means they literally cannot afford, organizationally or financially, to develop a product that initially has lower margins or serves a tiny, unproven market. even if that niche is precisely where the next black swan innovation is going to hatch.
So if you're not first to embrace these new, often initially less attractive markets, it's incredibly hard to catch up, even if you're a giant with immense resources. This first mover advantage seems to be a huge deal, especially when entirely new categories emerge from the unpredictable chaos of Extremistan.
Positioning, the classic marketing book by Rise and Trout, speaks directly to this. It emphasizes the enormous advantages of being first in the mind of the consumer. Think of iconic brands that define their categories. Kodak in film, IBM in computers for a long time, Coke and Cola, even Xerox in copying.
It became the default.
Exactly. The book cites the stark failure of marketing leaders like Coca-Cola trying to take on Dr. Pepper with Mr. Pibb. Despite Coke's immense resources, they couldn't dent Dr. Pepper's sales significantly because Dr. Pepper was first in its unique taste category. This demonstrates the immense difficulty of overcoming established market positions, even with immense resources, particularly in categories defined by novel needs or unique positions in the customer's mind. Once a new category or a blue ocean is truly established, the first to define it gains this almost insurmountable advantage. It reinforces the idea that identifying and capturing these new, unforeseen markets is crucial in an Extremistan world. It's often not about being slightly better. It's about being fundamentally different and establishing that difference first.
Okay, let's break down the implications here. This means true innovation, the kind that creates new markets or disrupts old ones, often comes from thinking different, as Apple used to say, from consciously challenging the ingrained mediocristan assumptions of an entire industry rather than just iterating on what's already known.
Absolutely. Start with Why by Simon Sinek notes, Apple's enduring philosophy. It wasn't just about making computers, it was about challenging the status quo, empowering the individual. This deep-seated why allowed them to differentiate and succeed where others focused purely on existing business models or product features. They played a different game. They consistently played a different game. They'd just iterate on existing products. They redefined entire categories, personal computers, music players, smartphones. They consistently operated with an extremist in a mindset, looking for those disruptive leaps, not just incremental gains. Similarly, the biography Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, and the Quest for a Fantastic Future describes Tesla's founding team as having basically no automotive expertise.
Which sounds crazy, right?
It sounds crazy, but they consciously chose instead to hire a bunch of young, hungry engineers and figure things out as they went along. They leveraged a key overlooked insight about adapting existing 18650 lithium-ion batteries from consumer electronics. This shows the profound power of a distinct vision, a willingness to operate entirely outside traditional industry norms, and frankly, a huge appetite for risk. That allowed them to tap into unforeseen opportunities and navigate the unpredictable landscape of new technologies and markets, a true Extremistan approach to innovation.
These strategic insights about experimentation, first mover advantage, thinking differently, they become truly powerful, I imagine, only when they're combined with effective leadership. Leadership that fosters adaptation, not just at the top, but throughout an organization, creating a culture that can actually handle the unexpected. Because a brilliant strategy is pretty useless if the people can't execute it in a chaotic world.
That's exactly right. The culture and the leadership are where the rubber meets the road, especially in Extremistan.
So, in such an unpredictable environment where the next big event can come out of nowhere and plans can be overturned overnight, how do leaders actually guide their teams effectively? What kind of leadership really works when certainty is a luxury you simply don't have? Is it about having all the answers?
No, quite the opposite, actually. Leadership in Extremistan becomes far less about having perfect foresight or all the answers, and much more about cultivating a resilient, adaptive culture. There's a stark warning in HBR's 10 must-reads on managing yourself. It gives an example of a CEO whose frequent temper tantrums and accusatory diatribes created this overwhelming atmosphere of blame and finger-pointing.
Toxic.
Totally toxic.
Yeah.
And despite his eloquent speeches about teamwork and innovation, his actions under pressure were far more persuasive. This vividly demonstrates that a leader's emotional self-regulation, a key component of emotional intelligence, as discussed in Daniel Goleman's What Makes a Leader, is absolutely paramount, especially when outcomes are uncertain and stress levels are inevitably high.
So how you behave under pressure matters more than what you say.
Immensely more. In an Extremistan environment where stakes are high and outcomes can be extreme, a leader's ability to remain composed, act with integrity, and foster trust through their behavior is far more critical than any specific tactical direction they might give. because that direction might be obsolete tomorrow anyway. Your actions become the most potent form of communication, especially when facing deep uncertainty. People watch how you react.
So a leader has to be acutely aware of their own impact, their own emotional wake. And presumably they also need to empower their team to make decisions and be proactive, rather than just waiting for instructions that might not come or might be too late to matter if they do. This sounds like a fundamental shift away from a traditional command and control structure that seems designed for more predictable, mediocristan environments.
It absolutely is a fundamental shift. Extreme Ownership, the book by former Navy SEALs Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, advocates strongly for decentralized command. This is a philosophy forged in the chaotic, high-stakes environment of special operations, arguably an environment that embodies extremistan principles.
Okay. What does decentralized command look like?
It means that junior leaders must fully understand what is within their decision-making authority, the left and right limits of their responsibility. The expectation isn't for them to ask, "What do you want me to do?"
Right.
waiting for orders,
Right.
but rather to tell higher authority what they plan to do, based on their understanding of the mission's intent. This fosters immense initiative, rapid response, and effective problem-solving in complex, dynamically changing situations. The book gives examples of the camaraderie and effectiveness formed between SEALs and Iraqi soldiers in difficult combat operations, precisely because of this shared understanding and empowerment.
So you push decisions down to the front lines.
Exactly. This framework fundamentally suggests that empowering individuals with clear boundaries and a clear understanding of the overall goal leads to far more effective adaptive action, rather than stifling decision-making by concentrating it at higher, slower levels. In a dynamic, unpredictable environment like extremistan, relying on slow, centralized decision-making is often a recipe for disaster. You need fast, informed action from those closest to the shifting reality.
And this empowerment, this trust, presumably means creating a culture where feedback is open and conflict isn't avoided, even when it's uncomfortable. If we're going to adapt to an unpredictable world, we need to be able to talk about what's really happening, not just what we want to hear or what fits a pre-existing plan.
That's a critical component, yes. Absolutely essential for building an extremistan-ready organization. Radical Candor by Kim Scott emphasizes creating a culture of listening, where employees feel safe and actively encouraged to generate ideas and voice complaints, and where leaders ensure no surprises in performance reviews by delivering honest, direct feedback consistently, both praise and criticism.
Caring personally while challenging directly.
That's the balance. And The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni illustrates this beautifully through the story of Catherine, a fictional CEO. She deliberately facilitates a much-needed melee, basically, a controlled, productive argument to force her executive team to confront underlying problems and commit to common goals and measurements.
That's unnecessary.
An uncomfortable but absolutely necessary conflict. It helps teams to align, build genuine trust, which paradoxically requires the ability to disagree, and ultimately make collective decisions and commitments, even when progress feels slow. As Lencioni notes, there will be many days when you will wonder if you've made any progress at all. In extremistan, burying problems or avoiding honest confrontation can have catastrophic consequences because a small, unaddressed issue can rapidly snowball into an existential threat. Transparency and productive conflict become essential survival tools.
So, what are the practical takeaways here? It seems it's not just about these big strategic shifts or dramatic leadership interventions. It's also about the daily, often mundane habits that collectively build a resilient organization. The small, consistent actions that prepare you for the big, unpredictable ones.
That's absolutely right. The seemingly small, consistent actions are often the bedrock upon which resilience is built. The new 1-Minute Manager highlights a simple but really profound principle. Catch people doing something right.
Simple but effective.
Very effective. This isn't about empty praise. It's a strategic focus on positive reinforcement, especially when someone is starting a new task, learning a new skill, or trying a new approach. By explicitly recognizing and reinforcing desired behaviors, you create this powerful feedback loop that influences future behaviors. It's a micro-level strategy for fostering adaptability and continuous learning. It encourages experimentation and growth, even when the broader environment is deeply uncertain.
It builds confidence to try things.
Exactly. It helps build the individual agency and psychological safety needed to respond flexibly when larger extremistan events strike. It gives people the confidence to try, potentially fail, learn, and try again.
And Sam Walton, building Walmart, really seemed to understand this dynamic, didn't he? Even as the company exploded in size, he kept focusing on the fundamentals.
He absolutely did. In his autobiography, Sam Walton, Made in America, he describes how the bigger Walmart gets, the more essential it is that we think small.
Think small to get big.
Precisely. He famously emphasized remembering that success is made one day at a time, one store at a time, and that simple act of greeting a customer is just as important in every Walmart today as it was in that little Ben Franklin, his original small store. This demonstrates how meticulous attention to fundamental human-level interactions and basic operational excellence underpins large-scale success, even in dynamically growing and therefore often unpredictable environments.
So it's about building a robust foundation.
Yes, a robust foundation of consistent positive micro-behaviors that can withstand macro-level shocks. It anchors the organization in a constantly changing extremistan. It suggests that even in a world of giants and massive disruptions, the small, consistent acts of value creation and human connection are what allow you to survive and thrive through the massive shifts.
There's a deep resonance here with how we perceive value itself, perhaps. I was struck by a quote mentioned in the sources from Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged about luxury belonging among the rails, the soot, and the girders. It really shifts our perspective on where true value originates, challenging those superficial appearances.
Yes, what truly strikes me about that particular passage from Atlas Shrugged is its raw honesty about creation. It speaks to seeing value not just in the polished end product, the finished luxury item on display, but in its gritty origins, in the often overlooked labor, the engineering, the infrastructure that actually creates it.
The source of the value.
Exactly. The idea that a symbol of luxury truly belonged in the place that was its source, to the men who created railroads and factories, is a unique and powerful perspective on value and connection. It challenges us to look beyond superficial appearances to the underlying, often messy, unglamorous, but essential reality that generates enduring worth. In an unpredictable, evolving economy, especially one that feels increasingly dominated by extremist and events, understanding the foundational, often invisible, processes that create real durable value becomes more crucial than ever. It's a potent reminder that the real strength isn't just in the shining facade, but in the robust, often unseen infrastructure, physical, intellectual, or cultural that underpins it.
These micro-level behaviors, the leadership styles, the focus on foundational value, they're all crucial as we operate within the larger, often incredibly complex and wild economic and societal systems. Because those larger systems bring their own layers of unpredictability, don't they?
Yeah.
No organization operates in a vacuum, and sometimes the biggest black swans come flying in from way outside its walls.
Absolutely. The macro environment is a whole other layer of potential extremistan jocks.
We've been talking a lot about companies and individuals navigating uncertainty, but entire economies and even societies behave differently too, and the rules seem different. Paul Krugman's essay, "A Country is Not a Company," really drives that point home. It's so easy, especially for business leaders, to assume that what works for a business like boosting exports will automatically scale up and work for a whole country's economy. But that seems like a classic, dangerous, mediocristan assumption applied to a vastly more complex and often extremistan system.
Indeed. Krugman absolutely shatters that common business intuition. The idea that a nation's economy can somehow be managed with the exact same principles as a large corporation. He explicitly debunks the notion that if individual companies within a country expand capacity and export more, the national economy will necessarily run a trade surplus as a result.
Seems logical, but it's wrong.
It's wrong because of basic accounting at the national level. He drops what he calls an unavoidable accounting truism on us. The overall balance of payments of any country must always be zero. So paradoxically, if a country is suddenly attracting large capital inflows, maybe foreign investors are pouring money in, it must by definition run a trade deficit to balance things out.
So attracting capital means a trade deficit.
Necessarily, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fundamental difference in how these systems operate at different scales. It's a classic example of confusing the rules of one domain, a single company trying to sell more, for another, a national economy interacting with the global system. The closed system world of economics, as the source puts it, often has very strong and very certain negative feedbacks, which in some ways can behave more predictably, almost like mediocristan in certain aspects, whereas the open system world of business can have positive, though highly uncertain, feedbacks, network effects, winner-take-all dynamics, far more akin to extremistan. This means mental models that seem perfectly logical and effective for running a company can be utterly disastrous when applied to national economic policy. precisely because the system dynamics, the feedback loops, are fundamentally different. It's like trying to run your household budget using the logic of the entire federal government. They simply operate on fundamentally different rules. And mistaking one for the other can lead to catastrophic policy decisions, especially when unexpected global economic black swans hit.
And governments, even with all their resources, their economists, their planning departments, seem to have an exceptionally hard time predicting the next big wave, don't they? The next technological or industrial black swan that will fundamentally change everything. Their track record is, let's just say, spotty.
Krugman powerfully highlights this exact point. He states that great business leaders often have a deep, detailed knowledge and, importantly, a feel for their specific industries that nobody, no planner or politician, can have for a system as complex as a national economy.
It's just too complex.
Way too complex. He points out that governments historically have an extraordinarily low batting average in predicting which industries will be the winners of the future, citing past government failures to successfully pick or heavily subsidize winners in areas like steel, nuclear power, or even advanced computing generations like fifth-generation computers. This just underscores the profound difficulty, if not the outright impossibility, of effective top-down central planning in a wild extremistan environment. The sheer complexity, the millions of unpredictable individual decisions, the constant emergence of disruptive, unforeseeable innovations within a national or global economy make it fundamentally resistant to predictive control. You simply cannot reliably predict the next iPhone or the next internet revolution from a government planning office. The conditions for black swans are constantly being created in ways no central planner can foresee.
And we're not just talking about old economic models being challenged either. New forms of capitalism, new ways of organizing economic activity are constantly emerging, and they seem to be bringing their own unique challenges and their own particular brands of unpredictability, creating entirely new extremistan dynamics that we're only just beginning to grapple with.
Indeed. Shoshana Zuboff's The Age of Surveillance Capitalism points to a profound and, frankly, quite unprecedented societal shift. It describes how what she calls surveillance exceptionalism, this idea that these new giant tech companies operate under different rules outside traditional oversight, allowed Google's data practices, for example, to grow with little regulatory or legislative challenge in the early days.
They moved fast and broke things, including norms.
You could say that. And crucially, Zuboff highlights how these hyperscale firms dramatically diminish any reliance on their societies as sources of employees. Unlike industrial giants of the past who needed large local workforces, these companies primarily recruit from the most rarefied strata of data science, often globally.
Okay, so fewer local jobs, relatively speaking.
Right. And Zuboff argues this fundamentally challenges the historical reciprocity that often existed between market capitalism and democracy, where economic power generated by industry often translated over time into broader political rights and widespread employment within that society. The apparent absence of these organic reciprocities with surveillance capitalism suggests a new, potentially less predictable, and perhaps less stable social contract. Its long-term social, economic, and political consequences are still unfolding. This is truly uncharted territory within extremistan, where the very mechanisms of wealth creation, power accumulation, and societal connection are being radically rewired in ways we don't fully understand yet.
This means the game is always changing, doesn't it? And we have to constantly question our assumptions, even about something as fundamental as wealth itself, how it's accumulated, how it's preserved, how it should be managed in such a fluid and often uncertain landscape. It seems to challenge even our oldest notions of financial prudence.
It absolutely does. And it's precisely why wisdom from seemingly disparate, even ancient sources can sometimes be so remarkably timeless and relevant. The Richest Man in Babylon, that classic collection of parables, offers enduring advice that feels surprisingly applicable today. It warns strongly against romantic desires to make wealth rapidly and chasing impossible earnings.
Get-rich-quick schemes.
Exactly, which often pop up in volatile, unpredictable markets. Instead, it wisely prioritizes security for thy principal, protecting what you have. It cautions that misfortune loves a shining mark, meaning those who flaunt their wealth or take excessive, visible risks are often the first to fall when things turn sour. And it reminds us that opportunity is a haughty goddess who wastes no time with those who are unprepared. This ancient wisdom contrasts sharply with a kind of speculative frenzy or get-rich-quick mentality that can thrive in unpredictable markets, particularly those governed by extremistan dynamics, where huge gains seem possible overnight.
But huge losses are too.
Precisely. In a world where the potential for extreme gains coexists with the potential for equally extreme losses, a focus on protecting capital, on building resilience, and on diligently preparing for actual opportunities when they arise, rather than chasing every speculative fantasy, becomes not just wise financial advice, but absolutely essential for survival and sustainable long-term prosperity. It's really about being robust to the negative black swans and being well-positioned, prepared to potentially benefit from the positive ones when they appear. Hashtag tag tag outro. So we've taken a whirlwind, yet I think deeply insightful tour through this remarkable stack of sources, and together they really paint a vivid and compelling picture of a world that's far less predictable, far less mediocre than we often instinctively assume or wish it to be.
From the subtle, ingrained biases in our own minds that constantly push us to expect predictability, to the grand, often sudden shifts in global economies and societal structures that reveal the true, wild nature of extremistan, the message seems clear. Randomness is a powerful, inescapable force. And expecting certainty, clinging to the idea that we can perfectly forecast or control outcomes, can be a dangerous, even catastrophic illusion.
We've seen that true success in this kind of environment isn't really about rigid plans that try to predict every twist and turn.
Yeah.
That's often futile. It's much more about cultivating flexibility, the willingness to experiment, about having the humility to learn rapidly from mistakes, seeing them not as failures, but as data.
Right.
And it's about fostering leadership that profoundly empowers adaptation throughout an entire organization, pushing decisions down. It's about understanding that what works perfectly well at a micro level or in a stable environment might not scale or might even be detrimental in a larger, unpredictable system.
Like the country is not a company example.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that entirely new forms of economic and social interaction, like surveillance capitalism, are constantly emerging, fundamentally reshaping the very environment we operate in, creating new kinds of uncertainty.
This deep dive truly makes you think, doesn't it? About how you approach every single decision, whether it's about your career, your investments, or how you lead a team, or even just navigate your own life. If the future is fundamentally a wild landscape, this extremistan, with black swans potentially lurking not just in the market, but in technology, in politics, in society itself, what comfortable assumptions are you holding on to right now that might be overturned tomorrow? And maybe more importantly, how will you prepare yourself mentally, strategically, emotionally to not just survive, but truly thrive when the unexpected inevitably arrives and those powerful extremistan forces come to bear?
And that raises, I think, an important question for you, the listener, to carry forward from this discussion. How might you rethink your own playbook, your personal strategies, your professional approaches to better navigate this inherently uncertain world? It's probably not just about chasing predictable gains, which, as we've seen, are often fleeting or illusory in extremistan.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's more about building true resilience, cultivating deep insight beyond the surface noise, and fostering the courage to adapt dynamically when the rules inevitably change, as they surely will. Something profound to mull over, perhaps, until our next deep dive.
Absolutely. Until next time, stay curious.